today can be the turning point in your life by making a simple decision.
Fundamental questions of navigation. Where am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there from here?
I invite the leaders of our planet to ask themselves these three questions before they make any crucial decisions.
But if you don't make decisions, you're going to stay right where you are.
We are all map makers.
We are in a time of transition.
If we're going to change, we have to change the direction that we're going.
Our planet needs leaders who know where they want to go.
When we change the direction we're going, then we want to make sure we're going in the right direction.
Leaders who can see the big picture.
Because if we're not, we're going to either go backwards or we're going to stay where we are.
Recognizing the psychological and the spiritual shifts and changes that need to be made, often from the inside to the outside.
To be able to shape your future, you have to be willing and able to change your paradigm.
Complex journeys require navigation. The path to the truth is one such journey. This is your GPS. Hairstyling services provided by J.D. Edwards Salon and Spa, Palmdale Shopping Plaza, Madera Street. Accessories provided by Chevette Williamson Jewelry. Standout jewelry for standout women. Good afternoon, all, and welcome to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. I'm your host, Michelle Malcolm, and as always, it's a pleasure to be in your company today. Thank you so much for tuning in and making GPS a part of your afternoon routine. I really do appreciate your presence here because this show would be nothing without you. So speaking of which, there is a way for you to participate in today's discussion. You can catch us on Facebook on the official Michelle Malcolm Facebook page, as well as on YouTube on the Global 99.5 FM and Michelle Malcolm YouTube channels. Call in at 326-0271, 326-0271, 326-0272, 326-0272, or on our WhatsApp line, 801-0271. 801-0271. You can actually call or text us on WhatsApp. And you can also catch us on Cable Bahamas channel 974. So now that we are all caught up into how we can be a part of this show, let's go ahead and get this party started. We are talking today about a matter that should be of concern to all of you if you're not already concerned. And it relates to international banking and by extension, the impact that it is having or will have on us here in the Bahamas. The collapse of major banks in the United States is having a negative impact on global financial markets, so much so that there's now cause for concern as to how it relates to banks worldwide, as well as small and medium enterprises and the economy. And you all know we are a part of the global community. The Bahamas is not an isolated, country that is not impacted by world events. So obviously this is impacting us as well. How will this impact your livelihood, you may ask? And should you be concerned? Well, joining us in on this conversation to tell you exactly why you should be concerned is Therese Turner Jones. She is an economist with 30 years experience in international financial institutions who works mainly on Caribbean countries and development challenges. She's coming to us all the way from Jamaica live today. Therese, welcome to GPS.
Thank you, Michelle. Great to be here. It's been a few months. I was last on your show in December, so just want to congratulate you for keeping these important issues in everybody's mind, but also using your platform to help educate Bahamians and everyone listening to this program about how they can either react to the situation or just understand it better to make better decisions for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us once again. And that is definitely the goal. Also joining us today, the critical thinker himself, C. Alan Johnson, coming to us live all the way from Grand Bahama. And you all know C. Alan quite well. For my regulars, I ain't got to introduce him because he on the show almost as much as me.
Can I have a plug? Can I have a plug? I'm coming from the soon to be the Republic of Grand Bahama.
Oh, you know something that I don't?
We about to start a succession movement since we've been treated like stepchildren, and we are key to the economic development of the Bahamas. And so, if you all want to remain backwards, we can embrace the future.
That's another show all by itself. Well, welcome to you both to GPS. I really appreciate you being here today. This is a broad topic today, so we have to do as much as we can within the next 2 hours to get people to understand what is happening here. So this whole thing started with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. And that, you started to see a little rumbling. Okay, the international markets, they kind of volatile. It don't take much to get them up in arms, but, we started to see little tremors. And then we saw two other major banks fall, including Credit Suisse. And that went from a little tremor to a whole earthquake, it seems, on the international financial markets. And now there are some who are talking about global meltdown as a result of what we see happening to the banking system in the United States. So I thought this was an important conversation for us to have because, like I said at the intro of this show, they say no man is an island. And even though we are an archipelagic nation, we're not, isolated. We are impacted by what happens around the world, especially seeing that banking plays such an important role in our economy. And so, lady and gent, let's break this down for our audience to understand what is happening. Let's start with the collapse of the banks in the United States and what that means. Whoever wants to jump in first.
Maybe I'll give it a go. So, Michelle, whenever we hear banking crisis, the reason why it's so triggering is because it suggests that there's a collapse of confidence. And of course, because our savings are, and the way business is conducted is through financial intermediation. If we didn't have banks, we couldn't get a lot done, trade, flows, everything goes through the banking system. This always raises an alarm, right? So to put it in perspective, as large as SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, is in this scenario, it's still only the 16th largest bank in the United States. So let's put, I think on top is JP Morgan with something like $3.7 trillion worth of assets. And SVB had something like 209 billion. Now those numbers are massive for the likes of any financial institution in the Bahamas because scale, right? Mm-hmm. So when something like that happens, obviously, it doesn't just rock financial markets in the US, because what happens to investors, they start to look at, should I be paying more attention to my portfolio of financial stocks and so on, and does this portend bigger crises? I think that reaction is normal. Where I would draw the line, because you mentioned that people are thinking this is a global financial crisis. We're nowhere near 2008. So remember 2008 with the Lehman breakdown and the whole world basically going into tailspin. Mm-hmm. That's a different order of magnitude, and I don't think that's where we are. I think for the US, supervisory and regulatory agencies, obviously there's concern, and you saw Janet Yellen's, she is the head of the Fed and also overall responsible for the US banking system, come out to say that what's needed now is paying more attention to banks. So I think those are all real. Moving along to Credit Suisse, again, because everyone, meaning all the investors who invest in financial stocks and so on, start paying attention, Credit Suisse has been flagged for a while as having lots of issues. If you go into their history, they've been scandal after scandal. And the Swiss regulators basically said, well, enough is enough. They even liquidated something like $17 billion worth of their bonds that they basically priced at zero now. So that's all money gone. But what the Swiss were able to do, UBS being the largest financial institution in Switzerland, the Swiss regulator basically said, okay, you guys, here's the deal. You're going to take over this smaller institution. The beauty of when these events happen if there's beauty, happen in large, wealthy, industrialized countries is that there are mechanisms to mediate a solution fairly quickly. Now, if a similar thing were to happen in the Bahamas or in Jamaica, if you recall, going back to the early 1990s, had a huge financial crisis that resulted in something like 40% of GDP being lost. And up to now, the Jamaican taxpayer is still sort of paying for that bailout because the government had to step in and do a lot of trying to fix. So I think the reaction that we're all feeling is visceral and it's real. And because it makes you nervous to think that, oh, my money in the bank may be unsafe. And by the way, this is exactly how bank runs happen. It just needs to be a whisper, oh, something's happening over there. And everybody rushes to the bank to take their money out. And as you know, that's not how it works in real life. Because when you put your money in a bank, banks immediately, in order to earn income on that money, they lend it out. So that's why we have regulators and inspectors of banks. And the Bank Supervision Department of the Central Bank, for example, is busy because they do a lot of inspection of banks and they're making sure that banks are adhering to not only the legal requirements that the Bahamas Central Bank has set, but also they fall into the international banking standards, which are set by standard setting bodies like the Basel Committee, or that they meet general standards. So, sorry, that's a long way to answer that initial question, but I think we get the picture that this is cause for concern, but let's not all panic because I think it's being managed by two very capable regulators and countries which can afford for something like this to happen with a good solution at hand.
All right, Alan, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts as you observe what is happening? What are your thoughts on this?
I think Ms. Jones did a thorough job in explaining that. But let me explain what happens, what makes today different from other days technologically.
Mm-hmm.
Whispers that used to happen was in isolation, a friend calling a friend calling a friend.
Mm-hmm.
These whispers now happen across social media, for which these are public platforms. And so when companies and information and exchange we have is in real time, and so when individuals monitor these, it's very easy for these to become viral. A simple post on TikTok, a simple post on Twitter, where the business people go, LinkedIn, or any one of these things in these discussions, it could very easily move viral. Essentially, the way Ms. Jones explained it is that essentially these banks are essentially stable in most regards. The problem is, like, I think it was it wasn't Silvergate, I think it was SVB, was that they were leveraged in a lower, they locked in some treasury bonds, having not been able to invest or spread it around at some low interest bearing rates. And so when a pressure came on them because of these whispers, they had to liquidate those, or they couldn't sell those bonds. So, and I think the treasury plays a small role in this, because as they begin to increase interest rates, bonds that they may have bought at 2% is now 5, 6, 6% you could buy. And so when it's time to liquidate because of undue pressure, they go to market. I would not, if I have a choice of buying a 6% bond and a 2% bond, I'd buy the 6%. So in essence, when they extrapolate from that, would this 2% bond be worth in a 6% market? They ended up losing billions of dollars, which then put stress on their actual structure and not being able to meet the liquidity in the manner they're supposed to be. And so what is happening now is that banks, even since 2008, is now have not just the regulators looking at them, you have the collective intelligence of individuals in the investor market and even armchair quarterbacks, etc., all looking at this, and information, whether real or imagined, travels almost at the speed of thought. And so it's almost, once that genie is open, it's almost impossible to negate it, because you could be solvent in the means of asset, but a bank run, as we would call it, whether digital or otherwise, could cause an undue pressure in redemption of individuals trying to move all their cash at once. And so if the problem is that you cannot control the human behavior, because as I look at SVB, I saw an opportunity to say, if everybody had remained calm and patient, chances are they could have navigate themselves out of this. But the problem is, if I have some money in the bank and they tell me the bank is going to be closed and payroll has to be done and these have to be done or whatever, and I have no means of 100% guarantee, I'm going to act in my best interest. And that's what everybody did in spite of. So you can't, typically speaking, you can't tell an individuals that really have no understanding of the banking back office to say, let me explain to you how banking works, whatever. They say, well, let's just see, and I get time for that. I got to go get my 50 grand.
That's
right.
All right. So
Michelle,
go ahead.
Michelle, just on C's point, on Alan's point about the 2% versus the 6%, that's really the bind they were caught in. Remember, the U.S. economy has moved from a very low interest rate regime to one where interest rates have been creeping up because the Fed has been trying to contain inflation. So what, SFB had their investments in, as Alan explained, and now trying to unwind those assets. There was a mismatch. And so, the result is history. And I think this is where the devil is always in the details. Again, you need good supervisors, good inspectors to say, we need to be careful. And I just want to add something about the whole supervision and how things work globally. So there are institutions like the IMF, where I used to work. In the course of doing a consultation with each member country, the Bahamas being one included, the US being another, the whole 184 members of the IMF, they get done something that's called a financial sector assessment, which is looking at taking a really deep dive into all the financial institutions in that jurisdiction and doing what are called stress tests. Alan may know about this, doing a stress test against certain scenarios. So, they would look at the balance sheet of, say, Bank of Bahamas or Scotiabank or whoever's operating and say, if we were to shock the system, whether it's another natural disaster or it's another external shock like a pandemic or it's a major, your external sector has collapsed for some reason, like tourism did in the Bahamas, that was a result of the pandemic, but take a shock and then apply it to the balance sheets of the banks, you come up with a certain assessment. And I apologize if you're hearing my neighbors hammering next door, but I can't help it.
We can hear you more than we can hear them.
Okay, good. So point is, pay attention to those reports. The last one on the Bahamas was done in 2019, and I had a very quick read just before this session. And I think while most of our banks are pretty robust and have really good capital requirements, and the non-performing loans have been coming down, especially since the pandemic. And if you look, as we started out talking about the global recession in 2008, for example, since then, lots of institutions have been under stress, but essentially because there was a lot of attention being paid to how banks operate, advice being given to people running the financial sector, that's much less of a risk, but there are still risks out there. And if you recall the latest credit ratings for the Bahamas, and the reason why we keep getting downgrades, Michelle and listeners, is that one of the biggest risks to come up in our context is the effect of climate change. Mm-hmm. And because of the potential of another Dorian happening more frequently than we would like, we have to start preparing for those risks. And I think this is where, again, devil hits the devil's in the details. But when policymakers hear about climate change and when the average person hears about climate change, we tend to think about it like, it's something way, way, way off in the distance, and it's not really affecting us now. But in financial markets, those risks are starting to be built into credit ratings, not just of sovereigns like countries, but also private institutions. I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah. See, Alan, you started to say something?
No, and this is the problem we have in the Bahamas is we live in Hurricane Alley. We live in one of those low island states that is threatened on a daily basis, actually being impacted every single day. But from an economic development standpoint, we don't have discussions concerning readiness and preparedness for this environment. And I've done some simulated stress tests without the data, because again, we are a data provisioning adverse society. We keep things in silos, we keep them hidden away from whatever. So you almost have to extrapolate, and most of the time depend on foreign sources for the information. But let's use, for instance, the sand dollar. And this is the question I've been asking of the central bank, is that as we begin to bring all of these unbanked individuals in it, what would happen if a bank run happened on sand dollar, which essentially is the central bank, where people begin to lose confidence, withdraw, spend, doing whatever. And no one has been able to or seem to want to address that problem. And it's the same thing with the underlying financial institution for which the Bahamas relies on. Because we remember now, we are an exchange note currency. We don't have technically, in any respect, we don't have a real exchange, a real currency. We have an exchange note. Give me one of these, I'll give you $1 US. And so, but for me, even this is a wake-up call. Before these major banks even fail, less than a week before I sent some notices to the various ministers in the government and says, look at the financial services. There's actually a panic or an opportunity that will avail itself to the Bahamas in the fact that what is about to happen, I didn't know what it is. I anticipated, I have the exact same note saying there will be at least 3 banks impacted locally, which I kind of consider the U.S. be at a 51st state, or internationally. And we should look at opportunities to how we could adjust our financial services and banking system and move into the digital realm to offer services that could actually strengthen us by embracing some of the various digital technologies, because we are dingy in this whole world of finance. And so putting in systems in fintech and supervisory tech and regulatory tech and everything else makes us an attractive destination for whether it be deposits or anything else, which then shores up our financial base, utilizing real-time technology that creates the environment that makes us a global player in this aspect. It also actually makes available investments within the country, because you can't have billions or trillions of dollars flow into your country without people beginning to pay attention to your country and even looking at investing in various different industries and potential. Because, if I'm putting $1 billion in the Bahamas, I too will look to strengthen the environment for where the basis of my money will be, and, without particular risk. And so these are opportunities for small island developing states in spite of their impact. And so what you do is you maybe face the pitfalls of climate change and global warming, but you can utilize forward-thinking strategies and integrate it into crises and look at it as opportunities to strengthen where you are and for building and development. One other point, like for instance, you had the Silvergate Capital and others for those individuals who are into ocean tech and climate change and various different things. And so if you could attract these type of environment, and having the fact that the Bahamas is ideal for the aquamarine economy, which is embracing ocean tech, green tech, the blue economy, and the knowledge economy, we can actually become a leader. And working in conjunction with our sister states of CARICOM and others, we become a regional leader in examining the pitfalls and opportunities we are facing. And so it's simply, we are, for me, I've seen us being a reactive environment as opposed to people who respond to circumstances.
I want to go ahead and read a comment from one of our Facebook viewers, and I'll let you both chime in, and then we have to go to our first break. So this comment is coming in from Siobhan Hollis. And Siobhan says, afternoon all. When Americans sneeze, we catch the cold. So it will only be a matter of time we feel this here. In fact, these banks are closing down as we speak. So something is going on, and the clients will be the last to know. The question is, are we prepared in the Bahamas? While it may not be a cause to worry, it is important to pay attention.
Okay, I'll take a stab at that. So, I mean, there's a lot was said there. For example, I mean, I don't think any banks are closing down the Bahamas. Just to get this clear. That's not happening because the crisis is not on our borders.
Right.
Now, when a financial crisis happens, there are a myriad of effects that take place in the real economy, right? So if you've lost money, if you've lost big chunks of money, then maybe you're not going to take that vacation. So that would be the indirect way in which the Bahamas gets affected. The U.S. economy slows down. Americans don't travel. It's same with Europeans. I mean, this is a very fragile macroeconomic environment the whole world is in right now. We've got high inflation. We've got lots of uncertainty. We still got a war going on in Ukraine. Don't forget about that. We have supply chain bottlenecks. It's a real, I mean, for economists and for people who think about these issues, there are lots of real problematic variables out there that we're trying to process. So I think what we don't want to do in the Bahamas is to start panicking. I like the intent of her message, which is, yes, we should pay attention because, yes, I think, as Alan just mentioned, we tend not to be in the driver's seat when decisions are made, especially because we're small, we're open, we have small government, we have limited capabilities. Small countries don't have a lot of people to think through a lot of issues a lot of time. And so hence there's a lot of reliance on outside agencies. And that's not always a bad thing because outside agencies, especially those in which we are members, IMF, IDB, the World Bank, these institutions are full of advice for us. They're our partners. We are members of these institutions. We are entitled to hear them out and to have our concerns placed on the table in a way where we are in the driver's seat of those decisions or policy changes or whatever the recommendations may be. I go back again to IMF reports. One of the comments of the 2022 Article 4 report, which I found the most disturbing, was, I will make a caveat. The report came out in May of 2022, I think it was, and it's backward looking, even though it's forward looking in terms of what policy advice it's giving. So mostly it's looking at 2021 data and then trying to project forward. So it's a bit dated today because we're not there yet for the new one. But just to say that, one comment was that our public finances are in a perilous state. Now that's really strong language. And for an average Bahamian to hear perilous state, that sounds like, oh my God, we're falling off a cliff. Well, as an economist, I think we're falling off a cliff because we are spending more than we are earning. Let's say from a fiscal point of view, the whole government, the economy, and so on. And when you see, as our data show, and there's a nice chart in there with all of the debt to GDP for the last how many years, but looking at the projection of that, small countries, the rule of thumb is essentially to try to keep your debt to GDP ratio at about 60%. And why is that? You don't want to spend all the money the economy is earning just paying off your creditors. You want to have a lot of money left over to do investments, to do public sector improvements, and so on. When we start spending more on debt service and worrying about how the next bill to Credit Suisse or whoever we're borrowed from, not Credit Suisse now, the UBS, as the Bahamas does, then that becomes very stressful, not just for policymakers, but for everybody, the taxpayers, because it means the only way for the government to meet those obligations is to tax more. There is no other way to do it. You either tax more to get more revenue, or you ask Bahamians to tolerate a a lower level of public service delivery, meaning because the government will have to spend less. That's the only way to do it. So I would pay attention to those issues and look at what are the macroeconomic impact if there is this bank failure continuing to go on in international markets, in Switzerland or in the US, and think about, will there be a slowdown in tourism? You know, what's happening in some, Alan was so on point when he mentioned that we have to position the Bahamas in a way to use the knowledge, because we don't have natural resources apart from sun, sand, and sea, which is locked us into one industry, tourism. We have to find ways to create value from knowledge. And the way you do that in today's world is through technology. And we have not spent enough time investing in technology, investing in how our children interact with technology, how our schools teach with technology, how the service delivery of the public sector can be improved through technology. Not that we're not making progress, because I think it's really important to state that 10 years ago, we couldn't pay our taxes online. We couldn't get a passport renewal done in 24 hours. We couldn't do the same thing with driver's license. Those are all really important aspects for making the government more efficient, but there's much more we can do, and we are really falling behind the curve on this.
Well, I want you to know that, well, my audience should know that we didn't discuss this as a group ahead of time. And right now, you talk in the Sea Island language. That's what he eats, sleeps, and drinks. Every time he comes on this show, he's talking about it. So, Sea Island, I think you founded a like-minded.
No. We're on this together because, Michelle, there is no other topic that I've championed more in my work at the IDB in modernizing Caribbean economies using technology. Because there is so much about the way we work and operate that is so 1960, not even 1980, just 1960, that we have lost ground. And the data is there to show we are not moving at the same pace as countries as small as us in other parts of the world have adapted to technology. Somehow we have figured that it's cute to do things by paper or still be running around trying to get a JP to authorize a piece of document so that you can go ahead and do something else. I mean, there are tons of stories, but the IDB has done some really good work in this area on how much it costs the average person in the Caribbean to do business with government because of how long it takes, either standing in line or putting in pieces of paper to get the same transaction done that if it were done online, it could cost a fraction of what it's currently costing. So we're on it.
No, I would say, because I get a lot of my information from these external reports, and the biggest problem we have, going back to the question she asked with paying attention, we could look at these opportunities. For instance, we talk about diversifying away from hospitality, when hospitality is either the 9th or 10th largest industry by volume of economics. So when you diversify away from something, you go to do something better. So the problem is that we have yet to diversify into tourism and hospitality. And so technology makes that opportunity. We focus on the cruise ships that spend, say, $98, but a person coming by air spends $1,400 or $1,300 something. Let's round it to $1,400, $100 to $1,400. So here it is that you have 5 million tourists coming to the Bahamas. And so in a critical crisis situation, yes, people will spend less. Yes, people will invest less. And so, but what happens though, if you have a strategy where you usurp the 5 million people for even say 1.5 million of them for 100,000 land visitors, it brings out a net zero impact. So if you get 500,000 land users for your 1.5 million or even your 3 million people, you can see the impact of 14 to 1. And so you can always target a whole new smaller demographics in the United States who would still have access to capital. And what happens is, because of the impact of their finances, that trip to Paris becomes a non-viable one, but one to the Bahamas where they can have the experience. And again, we used to sell sun, sand, sea, and service. We no longer deliver service. And I don't care what anyone says. We just simply sell sun, sand, and sea, drive by, come by, whatever. But then when you talk about government concerning digitization and digitalization of the economy, I hear people use the word digital transformation all the time. Digital transformation is almost a culture of the people. But we often look to say we're going to digitize governments, which is extremely important. But digitizing governments without a digitized economy they'll still negate the effort of one. And so you have to carry with the rising tide of technology must lift all boats simultaneously, as opposed to saying, oh, we've now created an environment for you to get paperless documents. Okay, then what are you doing now to make society able to access those platforms from their standpoint of not being non-technical, non-digital? And so this is why individually, and I think one of the failures I see CARICOM have is we are fighting a technological balance in isolation from each other when and I use the expression, a data lake, creating data warehouses from those information that we share, and we will take as we need and put as we can give into this in the environment, creates a harmony. We become a juggernaut in the tourism industry because no country in the Caribbean has reached their potential in this hospitality industry, as well as being able to divert. If we teach technology, we can divest into smaller microeconomies. If you put 500 people or 1,000 people in this, the impact of this minimum wage they're in, the skills transfer you transfer into them, and now they're moving into the 30, 40,000 is significantly different than creating a new thing. Just by putting 1,000 people in the knowledge economy, 1,000 people in the green, 1,000 in the orange, 1,000 in the conceptual economy. We have 12 different economies that's possible in the Caribbean. And so we keep looking at saying, oh, we have to do this grand shift, when we can actually say, let's put 500 in each of these 12. We've put now 6,000 major impact within the economy compared to even 10, 60, 70,000 of low-paying jobs where we simply do whatever. So I think the Bahamas itself have to look at the opportunity. This shift that is happening in banking is not going to stop. Digitization is happening around the world. Fintech, directly, indirectly in the back office, is disrupting this. The United States is now moving, I guess we'll talk about this later, into trying to move away from regulating the full gamut of cryptocurrency into a stable coin. Stable coins in a proper regulatory regime can actually usurp currency and cross-border transactions. We, in seeking to be leaders in this space, have to begin to have discussions to say, if we tackle this alone as the Bahamas, we may not be able, this may be too big for us to swallow. Why don't we cut this up and see how we can work in harmony? And the Bahamas, being the most digitally prepared place, can take the lead in it, but it cannot do it in isolation. And these are the problems that we're having. I see this period of artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital assets and things as a greater shift. And I think Bill Gates did his Gates notes yesterday. He says that in his entire life of technology, he has not seen a revolutionary period since we first put a computer on the desktop, for which I was there, since we first invented the internet in 1983, since we did the World Wide Web and a host of other different things. And this is the leader of a multi-billion, trillion-dollar company telling you that in his lifetime of technology, he's never seen the opportunities there. And so we too must look, we have missed these other opportunities. So, but the difference is, this is a knowledge economy. Just in the end, Michelle, don't run out. We used to be in a knowledge-based economy. We are reaching the inflection point in data. And knowledge base is where you extrapolate information or you exchange knowledge. We are now moving into a pure knowledge economy, which is slightly different from a knowledge base. And he who masters ideas will master this new economy. And so, you know,
we have to take a break. We have to take a break. Going into the break, I want to read something from somebody who sent this in via text. It says, how can we seek to getting out of this fiscal mess without speaking to how we got here to begin with? They dropped COVID on us, raised oil, and slowed production with a conflict in Ukraine so that countries like ours can fall into the fangs of the international money wolves to finish us off. Without acknowledging this, we are spinning wheels. I want you guys to think about that while we go to a break. And when we come back on the other side, we'll continue this conversation with C. Alan Johnson and Therese Turner-Jones. We're talking about the banking system in the United States, what's happening there, how it's going to impact the rest of the world, including us. Stay with us. This is GPS.
Understanding your microbiome, also known as your gut ecosystem, can change everything you thought you knew about nutrition, digestion, immunity, and metabolism. Keeping your gut ecosystem healthy and balanced is essential. Ultimate Microbiome by Longevity was specifically formulated to optimize this ecosystem. It provides the advanced support your gut needs through prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplementation. Our unique blend of probiotics includes Lactobacillus and Plantarum, healthy bacteria that can help prevent harmful bacteria from taking over your gut. Increasing your gut's population of beneficial bacteria creates a more balanced gut microbiome, which has been shown to aid in weight loss, skin health, sleep, mood, and may even help with seasonal allergies. Ultimate Microbiome also promotes the production of postbiotics. Postbiotics are key to help regulate your gastrointestinal health. To enhance digestion, Digizyme Multi-Enzyme Complex, a blend of 5 specific enzymes, has been added to Ultimate Microbiome. It can help break down food so your body can better absorb nutrients. Plus, we've added our proprietary I-26 Hyperimmune Egg Powder to aid in the elimination of disease-causing gut bacteria and help your body balance its immune response. Ultimate Microbiome, the scientific, proprietary, and holistic approach to gut health that helps optimize your body's entire gut ecosystem. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for rims, paints, and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Tracklight, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires, cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Blasted loud.
To stay healthy, it's crucial to make sure you get the nutrition you need every day. But it's difficult to get all your recommended vitamins and minerals from food alone. Even in the United States, 94% of people are deficient in at least one nutrient. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 by Longevity is a simple, convenient, and affordable way to help your body get the essential nutrients it needs. It's an advanced plant-driven multivitamin mineral complex that contains certified organic whole foods, trace minerals, and antioxidants. BTT 2.0 supports your body's natural defense system with a proprietary blend of energy-boosting and body-loving nutrients, plus prebiotics, probiotics, amino acids, and enzymes that support digestion. With an unusually high ORAC score of 8,000, you get even more antioxidants to help combat free radicals that can cause damage to your cells. But to get the most benefit and value from any multivitamin, your body must be able to break down the nutrients so you can fully absorb them. Otherwise, they'll just pass through your system without doing any good. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 was specially formulated with synergizing cofactors to ensure you get maximum nutrient absorption. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 is the easiest way to give your body the balance and complete daily vitamin mineral supplement it needs for optimal support of your overall health. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
This portion of GPS is brought to you by Tiki Bikini Hut at Junkanoo Beach. Great food, cool tropical drinks, and family fun in the sun.
So this coming Sunday and every Sunday at Tiki Bikini Hut, all GPS listeners will be able to get themselves a discount off of their bill for Sunday brunch. So for those of you who like to enjoy good food right after church, but you don't like to do the cooking, why not gather a group and head to Tiki Bikini Hut right after church and take advantage of their scrumptious choices as part of their Sunday brunch. Make sure that you mention that you heard about it here on GPS so that you can get that special discount that they are providing to GPS customers only. So we are streaming live on Facebook on the official Michelle Malcolm Facebook page. You can call in at 326-0271, 3260271, 3260272, 3260272, or WhatsApp or call us on 801-0271, 801-0271. And we are also airing on Cable Bahamas, channel 974. My guests today are Therese Turner-Jones and C. Allen Johnson, and we're discussing this, for want of a better word, challenge that we see happening in the United States, with major banks having to be bailed out for all intents and purposes, and how that is triggering concern in markets around the world. And we know that eventually it's going to hit the Bahamas as well in terms of why we should be concerned. Now, let me just put this into perspective for you. Cash short banks have borrowed about $300 billion with a B in emergency funding from the Federal Reserve in the United States over the past couple of weeks. Nearly half the money, $143 billion, went to holding companies for just two of the major banks that have failed, Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, triggering widespread alarm in financial markets. An additional $148 billion in lending was provided through a long-standing program called the Discount Window, and amounted to a record level for that program. And the Fed has lent an additional $11.9 billion from a new lending facility it recently launched. And the new program enables banks to raise cash and pay any depositors with withdrawing funds. Banks have posted high-quality collateral such as treasury bonds for all the loans, and the Feds expect that all loans will be repaid. So when we're talking those kinds of numbers, clearly, many feel that, with the international markets reacting the way that they are, even though the banks in the Bahamas are thus far in really good position, they're making quite a lot of money, actually. Many feel that it's only a matter of time before this trickles to the Bahamas. So as opposed to saying, oh, we good over here, we don't have to worry about what you got going on around the world, it is time, I believe, and many others do as well, that we pay closer attention to this and start to prepare ourselves, albeit late, but better late than never, for what could be a not so distant reality for us. And so we're here talking today about the impact of what we see happening in the United States, not only on global markets around the world, but more specifically, the potential to harm the economy here in the Bahamas, small, medium enterprises, small business, medium-sized businesses, and what that will mean for you and I as it relates to our livelihood, our daily ability to put food on the table and feed our families and live a fairly comfortable life. We are already facing very high inflation here in the Bahamas, I mean elsewhere as well, but we're feeling it here. And so what can we now begin to do from a national perspective to try to shore ourselves up for the possible future?
Let me just say something, Michelle, because you omitted something. There's two very important part of our economies that we always ignore.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in small developing states, is the cottage and the micro industries, which makes up a majority of our infrastructure. We often overlook those.
Right.
We go straight to small and medium businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is that, again, is diversification of the economy, where the Bahamas, for instance, prides itself on financial services being the second largest industry, removing the government out of it behind hospitality. But we have saw shrinkage of that from maybe 14,000 to well under 10,000 people, even though the figures has remained stable in the economic picture of GDP. But the inflow in the monies towards that recycles in the economy has been reduced. And so we have to begin to look at these various imbalances. But this is why creating micro industries in the country is very important, as to simply claiming that we have these, we say we want to go into a tech help thing. we have to stop looking as if though we're going to immediately in the instant create this multi-billion-dollar impact on the economy. It is not going to happen. We have to begin to look at ourselves just as we do in these small startups in the tech industry and otherwise. It takes them a moment with the access to a global marketplace and all the infrastructure support to grow into billion-dollar companies. However, it doesn't preclude them from entering that market. And so if you say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But if you actually share the bites amongst people, it is easily accomplished. And so, again, it goes back to us looking at this to say, okay, these banking impact will impact the investments, these multi-billion-dollar investments we announcing. Remember, these individuals that come into the country and have made the $300 million announcement is dependent on those $1 million condo sales to build out. So now a guy is very concerned about just taking a hit or about to take a hit and about spending money on a second home or third home or whatever else of an investment. He begins to reconsider those, which then begins to threaten these multi-billion-dollar announcements we have made, because they can't get the cash flow to build out in the timeline that they have. And so what it does, though, if you look at these IDB reports and other different things where the Bahamas has a habit of, for lack of a better word, prostituting itself through its crown land environment by giving away, which ties up those particular developments. And I am very familiar with a couple of developments in the Bahamas that works collectively in the hundreds of millions of dollars that can't proceed because those incorporates crown land under contract for a number of years, and individuals who have an interest can't get the people who have it tied up to concede or whatever in the way they have done that. And so we have to begin to reconsider what we have done in the past, because you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different results. But I believe it or not, I am an optimist. Being in the digital environment for 46 years, I see this as one of the greatest opportunities, like Bill Gates said, that has presented itself to small island developing states like in the Caribbean. But again, we must have a collective intelligence in conversation instead of an isolationist that we're going to build a tech hub competing with Cayman, competing with Jamaica, competing with Haiti, that we're going to have financial services competing. When if you look at all of our economy combined, it doesn't equal one bank.
I see you nodding your head, Therese.
Well, Alan has packed in a lot there. And, scale is quite an extraordinary thing, right? So it's funny when you live in a small country, and I live in Jamaica, which is 3 million people versus 400,000 in the Bahamas. And Jamaica is tiny, right, on the global scale. Bahamas doesn't really, it's a little blip in terms of financial markets or even inside the size of our economy. Not to say that we're not important in our own right, but I think what we tend to do when we're small is we use this phrase, we navel gaze, right? We only see what we can see because that's all we know. And I think the benefit of looking outside, not just for advice, but how other countries are coping around the world, has a lot of value. And I think this is where we tend to get stuck, because we're like echo chambers, and if we go to try to deal with an issue, it tends to then devolve into a partisan kind of approach to the solution, when that's not the right way to rationalize difficult issues. And I think we are very much in a moment of having to decide on some big, difficult issues of the country. I think what Alan's saying is we have an opportunity as a small region and as a small country to say, okay, what aspect of what's happening now in this new global way of working and being, and I think he hasn't mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it. One of the aspects that a lot of people are talking about right now, and I think, Michelle, you mentioned it at some point too, not today, but previously. Think about the impact of ChatGPT, right? Now, I'm still trying to wrap my head around ChatGPT. I asked my husband, I said, are you using ChatGPT? He said, well, I tried to see if it'll help me, but, it produce a lot of nonsense. But the fact that university kids are turning to ChatGPT to help them write essays, to in an exam, that changes a whole lot about the educational system. So I've been invited to a discussion with UE to talk about what impact that's going to have on the university, because so, let's take the academics at UE, they don't quite understand how to deal with it either. Will they be able to pick up whether an essay was written by ChatGPT? Right? So this is how, back to Bill Gates, the exponential rate of change of technology and how life as we know it. I mean, from 1 minute to the next, things are moving so fast that you're like, our heads can be going in many different directions. I say that to say, policymakers, and I include policymakers of every shape and size and political persuasion, you need to have a plan. You need to have a vision of where the country's going. Mm-hmm. What is it that I can hang, if I'm an investor, I want to invest in the Bahamas, I want to invest in Jamaica or Barbados, wherever, Switzerland for that matter. What is it in your policy environment that tells me, you know where you're going, right? So, and I come back to this issue in almost every discussion I have now today, which is, and until this region and each leader in this region has a view on energy security, how are we going to support ourselves on renewable energy? What is the plan? As an investor, I don't know. So what I do know that today, electricity costs is the biggest obstacle to doing business in the Caribbean. The Bahamas is one of the highest. Jamaica is up there too, top 3. Mm-hmm. So that puts pressure on what else can you do to diversify, as Alan started saying earlier. We know from our tourism industry, for example, that yes, there could be a lot more value extracted. We had a whole show on this in December, Michelle, where we talked about the point Alan was making. A cruise visitor is not a stopover visitor. So why are we spending so much time providing infrastructure for a set of visitors who basically walk in, trample our environment, dirty up the place, buy a beer or some comforters, and that's it, they leave? That's a lot of investment for very little value. So let's de-emphasize cruise visitors. Let's really think about extracting more value, even from our stayover visitors. Is there a way we can get them to stay longer? Can we get them to move away from New Providence to go visit some other family islands? Can we provide more local food so that we can cut down on our food bill? These are real big issues that politicians need to be grappling with. The energy issue I mention it because in Europe today, every single car dealer knows that after 2040, there will be no more internal combustible engine cars. So the kinds we use today. If it's not an electric car, you cannot sell them in Europe. That gives investors a lot of time to invest in the manufacturing of electric vehicles, putting in infrastructure for charging stations, whatever you need to do, training technicians on how to fix those cars. We don't have similar policies in our region. Why don't we have similar policies in our region? Because we haven't confronted the issue of fossil fuels and fossil fuel dependency. And why is that? Because we have locked ourselves into contracts that we haven't figured out how to get out of. And we, even though as a country, as a sovereign country, you are in the driver's seat to say to your importers of oil, sorry, in 10 years' time, because I have net zero carbon emissions targets to meet, I'm not going to be doing this. Please come up with another plan on how we can fuel this country without the use of fossil fuels, because it doesn't make sense. So the policy environment is really important. It tells investors, okay, I can see the Bahamas is going in the way of electric mobility and renewable energy, or they really want to invest in digital transformation, and so they've done this and that. And we have the fiber optic cables all laid, so it's not difficult to get broadband to people that need it. All this stuff we need to do to figure out better ways, not only to save money, because I pointed out earlier, we're in a perilous fiscal situation, We have limited diversified options for our labor, because a lot of labor in the Bahamas is not highly skilled. Yes, you can make beds in a hotel and serve alcohol on a beach, but beyond that, what are the capabilities that we really empowering our workers to do? And again, back to Alan, Grand Bahama is in an enviable position to be that sort of innovation hub. Locate, try to attract, as was done, let's say 30, 40, 50 years ago, when Grand Bahama started out as this port authority. Young people flocked to Grand Bahama, new opportunities, inexpensive real estate. Young people in New Providence can't afford to buy property or buy a house or something now because it's too expensive. They're priced out of the market. We've got all these family islands. We need a really innovative plan as how we're going to harness, not just, and I think, sad to say, it's already happening. Our young people are opting to stay where they graduate from university today, right? We're losing them to Canada. We're losing them to the United States because they come home and what are the opportunities, right? The scientists who are being trained, the medical professionals who are being trained. What are we doing? So I think we lack imagination in terms of our vision. We're not sitting down and having those really tough conversations, whether it's in cabinet or whether it's in a cabinet retreat, to say, hold on, what we really should be doing as lawmakers is trying to make laws which make sense for the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's not about winning, well, it is about winning the next election, but it's also about really presenting something that Bahamians can rally around, right?
Successive planning, yeah.
Yeah, that's where we need to be.
Yeah. See, Alan, you often talk about it. We are very good in this country. We're very good at presenting concepts without a plan. So we'll put out these beautiful documents about philosophy and concepts, but there's no step-by-step plan as to how do we get from point A to point B to point C. And that's a part of the problem, because what we're calling plans are not plans.
No, they're not. What they are is books of ideas. We are good at putting out books of ideas. There's no planning. There's no strategy of implementation in any of those. I use the expression all the time is that I tell when people bring me these so-called book of ideas, I say to them, I want you to imagine that you are going to visit 2 travel agents. In the first travel agent, I want you to go to them and tell them that you want to take a trip to Canada. And they ask you where you want to leave from. And I want you to tell them, I don't know. I want you to go to the other travel agent and this time says, hey, I want to leave from Grand Bahama to take a vacation. And they ask you, where would you like to go? And you say, I don't know. See, you must almost know where you are, always know where you are and where you want to go to plot a path. And somehow in each of our discussions, we never seem to know where we are or really where we want to go. It's like you say, somebody said a vacation in North America is great. And you go, okay, great. What part of North America? I don't know, but it's got to be great because somebody told me it's great there. And so we have no destination. And so, again, I know CARICOM itself has been failing at doing what is necessary because they come with a blanket thing of movement of people, again, with no real strategy. And so what you have then is a sovereignty issue where people like in the Bahamas who have failed to upgrade their immigration policies and regulations, because again, places like we like to admire, like Singapore and Dubai and Estonia, and all of these individuals have 2 million citizens, 6 million foreigners, and they're not going at no time with policies worrying that they're going to be outnumbered. But then that's because we haven't done anything, and other CARICOM states haven't done the same. And if we actually create individual strategies, I'm one to believe that the Bahamas, every January 1st, we should have a 5-year strategy, meaning that we have a 5-year strategy. After we pass the 1 year, we wake up and see, let's now create another 5-year strategy to replace that strategy, even though 1 year has passed, 5, 10, 15, 20. And if we get every other state to do the same thing based on their capabilities, move policies to and regulations to protect what their citizens consider views of form of protectionism, and technology enables this, is that we can now become an harmonious region, but at the same time, we have to then know where we're going to begin to develop those skill sets, because the threat to CARICOM is unskilled workers moving to another unskilled region for better pay, as opposed to attracting industries and things that we can transfer information into individuals. This upskilling in technology. In fact, Chat GPT and the other BARD and other type of, remember that it's not just Chat GPT, which is just, understand it's not Chat GPT, is just still version 3.5 of GPT, which we on GPT-4, working on GPT-5. That's a public, basically, beta release. So, but there's Google and Microsoft and other people who are now all competing with this. Now, China has about 3 different generative AI that's also entering the market. These are wonderful tools that we can begin to use to upskill our new demographics, because if you look at the millennials and Gen Zs that we talk about them, all of those born since 1981, they are born digital native, but they've never been taught how to integrate into these marketplaces where they can live local but work global. And so, again, we have not taken the opportunity for the 22 years we have been in the 21st century to embrace any of the 21st century concepts that's been available to people. We have a smaller demographic of people to train. Like you use Jamaica and the Bahamas as an example, is that we have a high literacy rate, and in these environments, I think the comprehension is better than most, and it basically multiplies across the thing. And so if we could then identify where these upskill opportunities are in this new environment, and the same global financial environment is taking. And as we begin to upskill these individuals, you begin to make vacancies for these unskilled and unprepared individuals to fill the slots that these current people are just basically parked in. I believe that also that our intellectual capital, as you begin to grow the opportunities for investments, those individuals that are parked in these countries, I don't believe the Jamaicans and Bahamians and Caymanians and other people literally wants to be there. They want to be in the Bahamas, in their paradise, as they call it. But the problem is there's no opportunity for them. But so where I believe that if we can then look to see, let's examine, even when children goes off to school, what are their studies going to be? Let's examine for those who have not come back what they have studied. And let's look to say, okay, we have demographics in the Bahamas that's insufficient to maintain this particular medical industry. But if we look at all of those diaspora of Jamaicans or Haitians or Barbadians or Caymanians who have, and we can protect the sovereignty of these individual states, we can have a conclave or enclave of individuals, say technology in the Bahamas, medicine in Jamaica, textile or other type of technology in Haiti, and various different things while protecting those sovereignties. But it has to be a strategy, and it involves collective thinking, again, as it is. The problem we have is that we are isolationists, in spite of claiming a Caribbean type of belonging. And I say again, we have parked our intelligentsia offshore when we need them onshore. So Bahamians out there that doesn't qualify here, if Jamaica has a strategy, they can go there and not serve a threat to Jamaicans, and Jamaicans can come here. Because again, it's always about the sovereignty, citizenship being outnumbered. Protect that, and you can remove that boundary. And if we have this environment where individuals can move around, and I don't have to worry about you taking my job because I'm trying to vacate my job to move to upskill. And so I just think that now is the opportunity for us to have this type of environment where we are dependent on these external forces like the banking industry, and they are beginning to have negative impact, and we depend highly on foreign investments. And so this knowledge is capital that we have. We just now have to convert it into currency, which is these intangible and unseen values. And these are the greatest of all, in this environment, the greatest of all natural resources we have. So let's bring our natural resources back into the country.
We have to take a break. on the other side of the break, we're going to look at the local banking industry. At this point, it's doing really, really well, but is it delivering quality of service for the amount of money that it is making? That and more on the other side of the break. Stay with us. This is GPS.
Your body's immune system is under constant pressure from things like stress, lack of exercise, and toxins in the environment. It's crucial to be proactive and support your immune system with the nutrients it needs to function effectively. But it's often hard to get these nutrients from food alone. Introducing fast-acting Zinc Plus Immune Support by Longevity. Unlike zinc-only supplements, Zinc Plus Immune Support builds on the proven power of zinc and adds complementary nutrients to give your immune system extra support. Vitamin D helps balance the effects of zinc, while our proprietary blend of natural fruit and root extracts provides the extra help your immune system needs to work against daily stressors. And we've included Longevity's exclusive plant-derived minerals to give your body the minerals it needs, but can't get from food alone. And because Zinc Plus Immune Support is delivered in a great-tasting, sugar-free, berry-flavored lozenge, it encourages quicker absorption of all these nutrients into your body. Zinc Plus Immune Support. Zinc plus the extra support your body needs to promote a healthy immune system. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for rims, paints, and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Track Life, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires. Cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Blessed love.
It's gotten harder and harder to get your daily requirement of vital nutrients from food alone. Without additional vitamin and nutrient support, your health and well-being can suffer drastically. That's why Z-Radical was specifically formulated. It combines a blend of antioxidant-rich vitamins, minerals, and botanicals with the protective powers of fucoidan to help fill the gaps from lack of nutrients in your foods. The core of Z-Radical is fucoidan, a naturally occurring polysaccharide that helps stimulate immune reaction, protecting you against inflammation and oxidative stress. We harvest this powerful mineral-rich nutrient from brown seaweed, harvested only from the world's most pristine ocean waters to ensure the purest quality. It's then extracted using cold process technology to ensure maximum levels of bioavailability. Then we add essential vitamins that help to protect your cardiovascular and nervous systems and are crucial for optimal immune and neurological function. Z-Radical also includes a proprietary blend of delicious antioxidant-rich fruits and berries. This great-tasting combination helps your body combat free radical imbalances that can contribute to a variety of degenerative conditions like arthritis and heart disease. Z-Radical. Experience the power of fucoidan with antioxidant-rich berries, 8 essential vitamins, and more to provide you with potent health benefits. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome back to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm in your company. And we are streaming live on Facebook on the official Michelle Malcolm Facebook page. The telephone contacts to reach us, 3260271, 3260271, 3260272, 3260272. And the WhatsApp line is 8010271, 8010271. You can call or text us on that number. We are also airing live on Cable Bahamas channel 974. So my guests today are C. Alan Johnson and economist Therese Turner-Jones. And in case you joined us late, we are talking about the collapse of major banks in the United States and the impact that that is having on global financial markets and why it's cause for concern, particularly as it relates to our local banking system. small, medium, and micro-sized businesses and the economy in general. So if we look at the banking system here in the Bahamas, it seems to be in pretty good shape, according to an article that was published in the Nassau Guardian back on March 16th. It says the profitability of local banks improved more than 87% during the third quarter of 2022, according to the most recent data provided by the Central Bank of the Bahamas. During that period, net income across the banking sector grew by $53.9 million to $155.8 million in comparison to the same period a year prior. When you see these kinds of returns, you would think that service would be improving and increasing. But instead of that, many people are complaining that it seems that the service is getting worse. They are forcing you in many cases to bank the way they want you to bank. Pulling out of many jurisdictions, keeping in mind that the Bahamas is an archipelagic nation. And so people are starting to wonder whether or not we are getting value for money. Keeping in mind what is happening internationally now with the collapse of these banks in the United States, should our banking industry, the key players in our banking industry, now seek to find ways to improve service, especially considering the money that they're making off the Bahamian people, as opposed to trying to force us into receiving less and less quality service? What are your thoughts on our local banking industry and why they should be paying attention to what's happening internationally?
Okay, maybe I start, Alan. Just because the transition that we're experiencing in banking services across the region is not new, right? Canadian banks, for example, which dominate this region, have been consolidating bricks and mortar for some time now. Mm-hmm. Whether we like it or not, at least one report suggests that Caribbean countries are actually overbanked. We have more banks than we have need for. Mm. So there's need for consolidation, and that has been going on. It's not so obvious from the Bahamas, but when I look across the region, you see Scotiabank has bought up some other smaller banks across the region, and RBC, Republic Bank of Trinidad, has been buying up other banks across the region. So that consolidation has been going on. But what Alan has been talking about a lot today is fintech and the fact that our traditional banks, we're accustomed to walking into Scotia or Bank of Bahamas or whichever bank and getting good quality service from workers in these institutions. Well, those banks in Toronto, where they're headquartered, almost that kind of service does not exist anymore because most interaction now, customer service between financial institutions and clients happens in a virtual way. Mm-hmm. I mean, in 2002, when we bought our house in Bethesda, Maryland, we got a mortgage, did everything without walking into a bank, right? So there is no need in a modern world for all of that face-to-face context. Now, Caribbean people because we're high context culturally, we like the interaction, and that's fine, but it's not efficient, sadly. Mm-hmm. It's not efficient. It may feel good to talk to somebody for 5 minutes standing in line in a bank, but that's not how people who are busy and who are productive want to spend their time. So this train is not stopping. This train left the station a long time ago. And sorry, but the banks, because of profitability issues, and you pointed out to this large profit report a couple of weeks ago, I mean, it's not surprising because banks make money from commissions, from fees, and if you insist on wanting to do a face-to-face transaction now, you're going to pay for that now, apparently, in the Bahamas. you know, I can't tell you the last time I walked into a bank physically. It's been a rare thing, maybe once in the last year to do something, and that probably was because I was requested to go in to pick up a new card or something, and they needed to now get more details. But it's not necessary, and it's not the future. You know, my 19-year-old daughter, who has several bank accounts, has no, you know, the notion of a checking account is not something that is familiar to her. She's never been inside a bank to do anything. She does transactions with her colleagues where they pay each other on Venmo or Zelle or all these other things. That generation, well, not even that generation, I don't want to do it either. There's no need for the kind of service. Now, banks, what I would say, where the buck stops at, am I getting a response when I need it right away? That's what I require my financial institution to do. I don't want to have to be waiting, you know, hours or weeks or something to get a response on a query because something on my bill is untoward. So the service that we're talking about that we want from our financial institutions is, you want speed, you want good quality responses in a good time, you want a mortgage application not to take 3 months. You want to be able to get on with doing your transaction without having this friction between you and your financial institution. And I think this is where fintech is eating traditional banks, because you just have to turn your TV on and see how many are advertised for you to opt to do that. Now, because we operate in the Bahamas with arcane foreign exchange regulations and so on, it's not that easy for Bahamians to say open up a foreign currency account. In a country like Jamaica with a liberalized capital controls, nobody cares. You open a foreign currency account, that's your business. You can go to an ATM machine and withdraw foreign currency as you wish. And that's where we want to be, right? The idea of putting obstacles in the way of people wanting to financially to intermediate business through a bank is anathema to a modern, well-functioning capitalist society, which we are. So what we ought to be demanding is better service, quicker service, not, you know, that you'd have 10 tellers out. The days of 10 tellers out in a bank, that's not happening anymore.
Right.
And you know what can help speed that up? Government. I mean, I think the Bahamas government is good at doing this now. Direct deposits, no more checks, right? Paperless. I know that's happening in the Bahamas, but there is no reason for any government today to be issuing a check to anyone, because that's not what we need to do now. We do things electronically. We give people a debit card, even if it means that's the way they're going to support you with your social services, right? So these modern ways of doing business that the rest of the world has figured out a long time ago, but we in the Caribbean think that it's cute to stand up in line in a bank, you know, just because we want to talk to the teller. No, that's inefficiency.
You know, Mama, don't trust that whole situation. But I'm like, no, you trying to cause problems, Therese.
You want to see my savings book and have the
yeah.
No. Alan, please help.
But I'm saying, what you do, if your grandma wants to have a touch it, what you do is get her a printer, a small format printer, so she can hit print. But here's one of the drawbacks. Let's use an example. I know in Grand Bahama where the government said they hired 300 people for this 1-year program. And we say we are digitizing government. So what they do is, because I think only two or three of those people was digital, the government then hired a company so they can hire them analog. So the guy just goes to the bank and picks up $100,000 and meets on the street corner and hands everybody the envelope, when it was so simple for them to get a $100 or some other account to have a transaction. And believe it or not, on Grand Bahama, for those people they hired for almost 1 year, they were paid in cash. So there's no transition. The government then comes and says that we don't have any bank on any islands in the Bahamas. That's not true. There is a bank on almost every island and key in the Bahamas. You know what it's called? The post office. The problem is not the fact that the post office bank exists. The problem is that the post office bank is locked into a paper era and bringing cash and distributing cash. How easy it is to digitize the post office bank, and all cash transaction, even the mom and pop on the outer islands can open up an account that they don't physically have to touch any cash, and the person can walk into this place, swipe a card or put in a code or something, and do the transaction in real time. It isn't that we don't have the potential. We're just not converting those into digital sphere. Here's what I've observed in the Bahamas and other digital sphere. And when Ms. Jones talked about going to the bank, I had not been to the bank in the United States for 20 years before I came home 20 years ago. And I was like amazed. I was actually fascinated with having to go into the bank to actually open an account when I came home. I was like, wow, this is an experience I totally forgot. So I do 90% of my banking outside of the Bahamas. I do 90% of my transaction outside of the Bahamas. Because even when you talk about digitizing banks and you talk about the major banks, how is it that you have a digital bank that operates from 9 to 5? Because essentially what we do is we call something digital. And what we say is you submit the information digitally, and we will then print it out in the room where it is at and handle it. Like I use an example for the pay gateway in the Bahamas for the police department. You don't pay directly to the government. You go and pay a facilitator the fee. You then have to go back to the police station and show them that receipt. And then they'll send you an email, and then you have to come back and do something else, and then come back for your document, which is again printed out. And you go, and then you had the minister saying, we are digitizing and transforming the police department and this whole technological advancement. And you're sitting there saying, did I slip in the tub and I'm having an hallucination, that we have blended to reality? And so it's the improper implementation of that technology is more dangerous than actually doing without the technology. Mm. And so you have probably 80-90% of Bahamians in the purest sense is unbanked. And the reason for that is that our economy has shrunk to such a manner that they can't, because they have not went digital, they stay away from the bank because they can't afford to pay that $10, $15, $20 in these transaction fees. And so they now keep their money in their pockets because they're living day to day. I've been into the bank, not recently, but a few years ago, where I'm talking to people in the bank. I'm literally in the bank, and there is 100 people or more in the bank. And I go, what's going on? I thought it was a run on the bank. But they were there to cash their checks. And the problem is that the banks try and encourage them to go digital. Says, unless you have an account here, you have to pay a fee. I had a seminar right there in the bank, and I said to them, open a checking account with the bank right now. Go right to the counter now, open a checking account, and you'll make a deposit, and you don't have to pay the $20 fee. They say, I think like 3 people over the line went to do that. I says, imagine now that you have a savings account here or whatever account here. They will give you an ATM card. You can now instruct your employee, because the employee banks with Royal Bank, to make the payment in your account. And you can now, if you need cash, you can go to the ATM and pay the $1 fee. And I asked them, is your time and the hours that you spend every Friday in the bank worth $1? And it's like we just did not have that rudimentary understanding of how financial technologies work. So again, it's an education process, because these have become habits that we've established. And you have mom and pop stores that don't understand that a $25 smartphone, you don't have to be a new one, with a QR code or something, can revolutionize themselves from getting robbed every other week. Cash they have. And so again, this is integration and into technology. And in all due respect, I think that the Bahamas foreign exchange should actually be digitized, and every Bahamian should have access to a certain amount of US currency. And they can do in real time, using technology and from a digital standpoint, the protectionist scheme that they have of supposed to be worrying about more outflows than inflows coming in. But we are still almost like every day, I don't know if the central bank does this, every day they get up and do a calculation and check their accounts, when technology would actually tell them in real time that C. Allen Johnson has reached his limits, and this person has reached his limits, and balance, and how much goes in and come in. And so opportunities are there for when we look at the way we have done things and are doing things. and the way the world is now shifting into these realities. And again, I make my concern about the sand dollar currency, that we are seeing how the United States and the interconnected global economy is making adjustments. This is an opportunity for us now to look at the adjustments they're making and say, how could we simulate this within the country and within the region? But the problem I think we have is that we have adopted a culture of 5-year celebrities, and they look for and focus on surviving 5 years. And we're not building the future. We literally have the opportunity to build the future. And I think if we could get our leadership to begin to think about legacy as opposed to lasting, we could literally transform our economies. And that is where the problem is. It's not, we're not lacking the opportunity. And it's there right in front of us. And like she says, her daughter, I don't know if any of my children ever been in the bank. Never in their life have ever been in a physical bank. I can almost bet of the dozen of them, none of them have ever been in a physical bank because they grew up in a digital house. And just use an example, I co-signed on 3 different mortgages over the last 5 years. I have not left the jurisdiction of the Bahamas in 19. How is it that I did banking, signed documents, purchase of house for my children, and did not leave, and was able to identify myself using biometrics and other identification process, and sign documents buying homes for hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Yeah,
this is where we need to be.
I think this texter, this person on Facebook says it best. I don't think the powers that be want full digitalization because it's too detailed. They don't like that much accountability and transparency.
Michelle,
yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
On that note, it's not about whether the powers that be like or don't like.
Mm-hmm.
It's again, and it's hard to accept sometimes that there are outside observers that rate us, right? So
yes.
we are rated on lots of different kind of scales. So one of them is competitiveness, and that would look at things like how easy is it to do business in the country, how easy is it to connect to electricity, and so on. The World Bank used to do the doing business indicators, and that collapsed in 2019, but they're about to come up with a new barometer. But there are other agencies that do similar work. And it's not like your country avoids scrutiny. So the outside world, and for example, Transparency International looks at what's the perception of corruption in a country, and we know that we're not doing that. I think we were the second best country in the Caribbean after Barbados, but still our score was like 64 out of 100. Jamaica didn't even make 100 in terms of their score. But whether you like it or not, the country's getting graded around the world on various ways of being and doing. And part of the grading comes from, what's the policy environment like? And to get real, the realest thing we have in the financial sector are credit ratings. So when you read those reports, the Bahamas credit ratings for years now have been getting worse and worse. What does that mean in practical terms? We all pay higher interest rates because the country is seen to be less creditworthy than it was, say, 20 years ago. And it doesn't have to do with any particular administration being in power. It has to do with some variables that are assessed on an annual basis. We talked about this already, the debt sustainability, export earnings, our ability to put policies in place that are clear and transparent. So the notion that a government wouldn't want to be transparent about its policies makes absolute no business sense, because the rest of the world looks and says, well, what are your policies around electric mobility, renewable energy, disaster preparedness, disaster mitigation, pandemic preparedness? These are questions that everybody's asking because they make sense. And so there are ways to measure our performance, whether we like it or not. We are being measured on an ongoing basis by international agencies, by private sector businesses, because if you're not perceived to be competitive, well, let me take my business elsewhere. And, obviously things like tourism, we must score high on, because we continue to attract lots of investors in tourism over the years. But when I look at, for example, the reports that talk about how pleased cruise visitors are, the Bahamas port rates poorly in this region. I think it's something like number 17 in the Caribbean. That's a disgrace, considering we have millions of them dropping on our shores onto Bay Street every single year, and on a daily basis, up to 26,000 people flooding Bay Street. Now, if our port is not considered to be a desirable one, and the experience that cruise visitors have is not desirable, that speaks about us. What do we have to offer? The whole experience. And so the same way you're going to rate whether the service in your bank is 100% or 20%, people are rating us on their experiences. And no amount of feel-good handshaking, memo signing, contract signing between a politician and an investor who's going to do something in 8 years' time, that doesn't say a thing. All it says is that we're good at attracting people to take a look at the country. But when they start if it takes 8 years for you to make a decision for 250 jobs on this announcement last week, I mean, something must be wrong about that if it's going to take that long for a project to come to fruition. So all of this suggests we need, as Bahamians and as stakeholders in our society and in our economic well-being, and I'm saying this because I'm talking now about what's the future generation? What are we leaving behind? Is it a healthy environment we're leaving behind for our youngsters? Are they being equipped with the kind of education and tools they need to live in a digitized world that Alan so aptly described? But when we compare, objectively, what are our science results compared with children coming out of Finland, we fail. And that failure suggests that we're going to fall behind even further on being able to deliver in science and in technology and so on. And that affects us globally. The other important point Alan was making is about migration policy. It's a very hot topic, and nobody wants to cede part of their patrimony to foreigners. That's just I think it's human behavior. We have xenophobia, whether we like it or not. We may even be silently racist against people of our own kind. But the point is, a country like Singapore, how was it able to develop? It said, we have a small population. We don't have the skills we need. We better bring in some skills from Malaysia and China and elsewhere to boost our skills. I mean, that takes foresight and vision. And that takes leadership, being able to convince the population, whether you like it or not, whether you think benevolent dictatorship is a good thing or not. But it's leadership, because it says, this is what we're going to do. And by the way, all of us, Singapore is going to be better off in 20, 30, 40 years' time. And they've consistently had that policy. I give you another example, Guyana. Guyana is a country of 700,000 people, tiny population on a geographical mass that is, almost the size of Brazil. It's huge. It has just discovered oil like never before. It's our Saudi Arabia in our backyard. Mm-hmm. Guyana doesn't have the population to benefit from this oil wealth. What's going to happen? Most people predict it's going to fall the way of Nigeria in terms of the management of the oil wealth, because what you have are small number of people who are making decisions on very tribal basis. And I don't want to go into that here, but you've got a small number of people who are not making the right decisions in the interest of Guyana long-term. Why? Because as a politician, I'm more interested in my short-term gains.
Right?
I don't really care what's going to happen in 20, 30 years' time, because I'll be dead. And sadly, a lot of our political leadership have that horizon. Alan calls them the 5-year celebrities. Mm-hmm. That's I never thought of it like that, but that's a really good image, because that's exactly what we see. We see a lot of handshakes and announcements, and we see very little transformation and very little real ideas about how everyone's going to be better off after the 5-year term is ended. I don't want to say that politics is easy. It is very difficult. I know it's difficult because I've seen for myself being in the presence of a minister with constituents and feeling like this cannot be what ministers do. But what ministers do and politicians do, they spend a lot of time solving problems that I don't think politicians in developed countries have to solve. I mean, my fridge broke down. My child needs school fees. My child doesn't have uniform. You know, that's not why cabinet ministers hold those positions. It's not to solve your fridge problem or your school uniform problem. Their brains need to be focused on how we're going to get this country to function in a way that all of us are better off in the end. And it's not just all of you in that particular constituency because you voted for me. No,
I think
once you're elected, your job is to do the job for the country.
But you see a part of the problem, Therese, based on what you're saying, because what you're saying is absolutely correct as it relates to the role that they should be playing. But they themselves don't want to give up the power that comes from lording it over people, because a simple implementation of local government would take care of what you just described. Let the local government arm be responsible for all those little things.
But Michelle, no, what I'm saying.
Exactly, but they don't want that.
Agree. What I'm saying goes deeper. What I'm saying goes deeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying having voted for X, I shouldn't have a relationship with Mr. MP or Mrs.
I get
MP.
that. I get that.
I'm not saying that. I think that's important for community development and understanding who we are as people. We need social solutions, so that's important. But guess what? We have agencies of government that are responsible for social welfare. For if your child needs something, you direct them to social services. The minister's time can be taken up with, those issues. That's what I'm saying is, once you're doing your job and agencies of government are doing their jobs, things work. Things will work. But everybody needs to feel that it's working for every citizen of the country and not just because I voted for that party, this is my time now and it's not your time.
Right.
That's just not how modern, sophisticated societies work anymore. And I know everybody will say, but in the US it's no different because you have lobbyists and so on. The same thing happens. That's besides the point. I think we are in a position where small countries, we are very much connected to our communities. We can educate our citizens about why it is that the debt is 84% of GDP. You can explain that. You can say, well, Hurricane Dorian cost us this amount. The pandemic cost us this amount. We're going to work really hard to bring this debt down because only when we bring it down, the interest on that debt goes down, which allows us to have more savings to do more for education and roads and blah, 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 health. But by not telling us that, nobody knows that the debt is too high until, oh my God, the IMF is here and the IMF is telling us what to do. Well, actually, no. You happen to have bumped up into an obstacle because now you can't pay the debt. And now everybody is excised about it. And let's not demonize international organizations. We are members of those organizations. We have a say in those organizations. We can say to the fund, no, I'm not going to do that. I want to protect my social services. They are willing to work with us. And I'm not saying that's where the Bahamas is, but it's better to be in the driver's seat, accompanying some sensible policies so that everybody can say, yeah, the Bahamas seems to be going in the right direction because I know this, I know that, and next thing. And every Bahamian should be able to tell their own story. And it should be consistent. I'm from Long Island, but I don't agree with what's happening in Cat Island. Well, why not? Well, because I don't know, right? That's not good enough. That's really not good enough. We need one coherent story, one narrative that every Bahamian can tell and will be proud of. It's not that difficult to do.
I think it goes back, and see, Alan, I want you to hold that thought because I have to take one more break. I think it goes back, though, to the whole question of an absence of a plan. And I want to go back to something that you said earlier, Therese, about Bahamians, whether we want to admit it or not, are xenophobic and and have a hatred for, people who look like us. I think a part of the challenge that many Bahamians have as it relates to this whole question of immigration is that, yes, we acknowledge that we do not have all of the skill sets that we need in this country within our own population, but we don't see where there is a consistent effort to go after nation builders and bring them into the mix. What we do see is an opening of the floodgates to cheap labor, because there seems to be this all-out, well, the one thing they do seem to be planning is that they want this cheap labor to beef up their businesses, etc., but they're not putting the same effort into identifying persons like Singapore did who can help to develop and build this nation. So as I often hear, it's not that Bahamians hate particular groupings of people, they just love their country more. And I think if we put more emphasis into identifying people who we can bring in here who can help to build this nation, as opposed to just creating this mass of cheap labor, then this would be a totally different conversation. But we have to take a commercial break. So let's do that, and then we'll continue with this conversation. Time is gone. I mean, we only have 13 minutes left in the show. So let's see how much we can get in that last 13 minutes. We'll be back after these with our sponsors.
At Lee Air, safety is our #1 priority. Flying since 1996, we offer scheduled flights into Fresh Creek and Mangrove Key Andros and Great Harbor Key, Berry Island, twice daily, 7 days a week. Affordable charter services are also available to anywhere in the Bahamas and the Caribbean. Lee Air Charter Services. Call 225-3267, 702-7127, or 322-1317 for reservations.
Understanding your microbiome, also known as your gut ecosystem, can change everything you thought you knew about nutrition, digestion, immunity, and metabolism. Keeping your gut ecosystem healthy and balanced is essential. Ultimate Microbiome by Longevity was specifically formulated to optimize this ecosystem. It provides the advanced support your gut needs through prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplementation. Our unique blend of probiotics includes Lactobacillus and Plantarum, healthy bacteria that can help prevent harmful bacteria from taking over your gut. Increasing your gut's population of beneficial bacteria creates a more balanced gut microbiome, which has been shown to aid in weight loss, skin health, sleep, mood, and may even help with seasonal allergies. Ultimate Microbiome also promotes the production of postbiotics. Postbiotics are key to help regulate your gastrointestinal health. To enhance digestion, Digizyme Multi-Enzyme Complex, a blend of 5 specific enzymes, has been added to Ultimate Microbiome. It can help break down food so your body can better absorb nutrients. Plus, we've added our proprietary I-26 hyperimmune egg powder to aid in the elimination of disease-causing gut bacteria and help your body balance its immune response. Ultimate Microbiome, the scientific, proprietary, and holistic approach to gut health that helps optimize your body's entire gut ecosystem. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
For all your building needs, it's Carib Construction and Project Management on Gladstone Road. We build it all. Schools, homes, hotels, and more, including structures requiring a Phase 3 electrical contractor. We also provide project management services. The first step towards your dream building begins at Carib Construction and Project Management. Call us at 376-1556 or 341-4466.
One of the things I love about the mailboat is their relationship with Bahamas Air. I can earn travel points on my international freight and redeem them when I fly.
For me, online shopping is easy, with mailboat to US addresses and regular freight delivery to Nassau. Plus, I can always prepay customs and freight, and they always notify me when my package arrives.
Yeah, a lot of people think the mailboat is just for shipping, but they also offer a safe and secure storage facility at affordable rates, all in a central, convenient location.
We also offer passenger service into Freeport multiple times per week with a seating capacity of over 450 persons. With family movies on large screens, one hot meal included, and on-board lounge for snacks and soft drinks. We're the Mailboat. We're bridging people, products, and places.
Executive Printers is your one-stop shop for all your branding and customization needs. Letterheads, envelopes, business cards, invoices, share and gift certificates, rubber stamps, vouchers, funeral programs, brochures, flyers, banners, and promotional items like mugs, water bottles, mouse pads, and key rings, all with personable service and great quality. No project is too small or too large. For great turnaround and competitive pricing, make an executive decision. Call us at 393-5011.
Welcome back to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm here, along with Therese Turner-Jones and C. Allen Johnson. I want to read a comment real quick, and then C. Allen, I know you wanted to respond to something that was said in the last segment of the show. So this particular comment from Hollis, Siobhan Hollis says, it seems they don't want to hire skilled Bahamians. I, for one, like many, would love to return home, but they don't want to pay me for my worth. The reality is they want minions or puppets and cheap labor. What was it you wanted to say, C. Allen?
Well, when we talk about developing these skill set, and I absolutely believe it with Ms. Jones, is that when we talk, first of all, for us to develop an environment where we want to develop our people, we first have to put people competence in parliament as opposed to family, friends, lovers, and fanatical supporters. Mm-hmm. Secondly, where we talk about this shift in the diaspora that we need, and for the individuals that just said that, they don't want to pay you what you need. The problem is that we confuse definitions of employment with compensation at a particular skill level. And you say, I now have a degree in technology, and I should be, because people in the US are being paid $50,000, $60,000, when I come home, they offer me 20. The problem is there's no discipline to support in that particular environment other than the name of technology to support you being paid. I've heard this argument all the time about overqualified. For me, there's no overqualification. You'd be simply being underpaid. And so, but you can't say that I am qualified in this particular region and I'm employed in a non-aligned environment because your qualifications over here that you should be compensated in this particular environment. So this is where the whole balancing act that happens. When we talk about these, and I see this in the Bahamas for the last 20 years, I see MPs fixing lights in neighborhoods, cleaning roads, cleaning parks, say they patching roads. And I ask myself, what are we spending $60 million for a month for the civil servants? And remember that's their salaries alone. That doesn't include the tools that is necessary for them to do their job. So if I'm paying for the Ministry of Works at the tune of $400 million a year for development, another maybe $20 million a month, or even put it at $5 million a month for salaries, why is the MP collecting donations to pave the road? Where is this salary and this skill set that lies in this particular ministry is? And so we can just get away from putting individuals that goes to parliament to develop legislation, policies, processes, programs, and procedures. And their focus is on that. And the civil servant, that we're spending $400 million a year for, not counting the tools, was to do their jobs. There will be no potholes. There'll be no light out. There'll be no parks cut and whatever else. And so we have this distortion in responsibilities. And because we have not developed the people, and if you build people, they'll build the roads, build people, they'll build the bridges, build people, they'll build the airports, build people, they'll build the homes. We have not focused on these strategies of building people. We then have individuals who then have to, through indoctrination, shift their thing into survivalistic mode. And I have to get whatever I can to make it till tomorrow. And so what happens is you then have a nation in survival mode and nobody is planning. And you have to ask, where do our leadership come from? So now we have diminished our leadership pool in each of our constituencies. And so then we take the best of the worst and send them to Parliament. And we have basically sent away the intelligentsia needed to develop. Then we have systems that actually lock us in. You know, where we say the system need to change, that lock us in to what we have adopted as our habits and say we can't change it. So we just need a real conversation. And again, I'm saying, we have the opportunity right now in this banking that we started to talk about and this global shift to rethink and reimagine ourselves and our economy.
I'm going to give you, Therese, the final thoughts because we have we have 4 minutes left in the show. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to give us your final thoughts on this.
Thanks, Michelle. I mean, it's amazing where we started this conversation and where we've ended. But I think it goes to show that there is so much, and you mentioned it before the break, that in the absence of a national development plan, and that's because IDB was involved in a national development plan, I'm not going to say one does not exist.
Right.
One exists. The issue is taking that plan, any country worth its 5 cents has some kind of map as to how it, as Alan said earlier, how you're going to get from point A to point B. Without a map, you're going to get lost. And, you know, I think it's policymakers' jobs to keep us from getting lost. And it, you know, these ideas don't have to be so earth-shattering. We just want something consistent and a narrative that everyone can identify with. And I think because Bahamians are so creative, because we have so much talent, we're small and we know how to harness resources we don't have. Take the financial sector in the Bahamas. You know, the 3,000 odd employees in the financial sector in the Bahamas, a good chunk of them were foreigners, are foreigners. And we don't have problems employing or giving work permits to those foreigners because the banks require it. But what we have to make sure is that that foreign knowledge somehow translates into Bahamian knowledge on the ground. And if you talk to any Bahamian working in the financial sector, what do you hear first? We know more than the foreign worker does. And that's probably true. And that's something to build on. But I think moving forward, the notion that we can continue to develop without direction is where we're losing ground. And I think we have opportunities, as Alan's saying, to harness technology and to just be bold with a vision and say, this is where we're headed. And I think Bahamians would really love that, especially in our 50th year. We want to know, what's the next 50 going to look like? Here's an opportunity for us to do that. Thank you, Michelle.
Well, I want to thank you both for being here today. I think this, hopefully, those of out there listening got some good ground, good information from the show, because I certainly did. I think this was a great conversation and one that prompts us to think beyond what we see right in front of our eyes and think into the future, because like it or not, no matter which government is in power, if they fail, all of us are going down. So we need this to work. And I think that we need to open our eyes and realize that unless we make some serious changes, we're all going to be sinking on this ship. Ain't nobody got no time for that. Like the young people say. Listen, I want to thank you both. My time is gone. It's 4 o'clock. Got to get out of here. Thank you so much for tuning in. To all of you who did, thank you to C. Alan and Therese. Tomorrow is TGIF Open Line Friday, when we talk about the week that was, and you serve as my co-host. Looking forward to it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Global 99.5 FM reminds our listeners that the views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the host and